I am a drug dealer, and you should not smoke what I am selling. It starts with people needing some help. It might be a girl you like, or some guys you are trying to impress, or even just an old buddy you bump into on the street. The important thing is that you have got a reputation for smoking weed, and they had like some. Maybe they are new to town, or they want to throw a party and want to impress someone as a one-off, but they need you. They need your help. So that is what you do. You start to help them out by buying weed on their behalf, and then you start charging extra because it soon becomes regular, and it is more than just a favor, and then you realize you are putting so much time into it, you need to find someone who sells large amounts at a discount. Eventually, you realize we'd wanna cut it. The margins are too low, and the work is too hard. By now you have 4 phones, way too many friends on Facebook, a day job you fucking hate, and so much of your time goes into being a dealer that you have given up hopes of it just being a hobby. Oh, and of course, you have your own addiction to take care of. Most of the time you will be lucky to break even, but selling weed helps. Maybe the guy you buy off mentions mushrooms, or MDMA, or something else that is common. But the important thing to remember is that it is a surprisingly short road to heroin. It pays the most, weighs very little, and you don't have to worry about spreading yourself too thin. Now you will be able to get a little book of real valuable repeat customers. And, if you are like me, you might just have had enough sense to never try your own product. But it is still a problem. Every person who buys is a ticking time bomb, a walking liability. And every day you work this job, you are not doing something else, something with prospects. And it only takes one arrest to fuck it all up, and it only takes one idiot to lead to that arrest. See, what I did was I went after a certain kind of client, someone who through luck and opportunity, is rich enough to hide their addiction. Someone who doesn't look like an addict, if you get what I mean. They are hardly immune to the effects of addiction, but consequences are a lot less severe for the upper classes. Good thing that applies to their dealers too. It is nice to have clients who don't die every few years. That is not to say their health is my #1 priority, but I have known most of them for going on 8 years. I have helped them move, fix broken down cars, find dates, rehearse presentations, pick up deliveries, and on one occasion I even babysat one of their nieces while they got high in the garden shed. Sadly, I would have to admit that they are my closest friends. And about a fortnight ago something bad happened to each and every one of them. Normally I like to sell all my goods on a Sunday, no open door policy and no phone calls. I keep a consistent routine and it avoids trouble, but last Tuesday I had one of them knocking at my door. I was pretty pissed to have this guy, Rollo, Donnet ask, not his real name, turn up out of the blue. That is not how I like to do things, and I was pretty damn close to not opening the door. But, as you might guess, junkies are resistant to denial, and he wasn't going to go away out of politeness. So, in the end, I let him in. But to my surprise, he wasn't there to buy. He came straight in and put a brick of the stuff in my hand, leaving me totally speechless. He then went on this winding rant about his childhood and the things his mother did to him, and the scars she left, and after a long time, he eventually got to the point. I found it, Rollo told me. I found it in a gutter on the side of the road, way out in the middle of nowhere. I was driving home and my wife she will oh man I just spotted it. What a weird thing, right? My headlight caught it, and I was like wait was that no fucking way, but it was. Just a brick of the stuff waiting for me in a ditch in the middle of nowhere and he paused and bit down on his thumb so hard I thought he was going to snap it off like a baby carrot. I will kill myself if I have this much, he said. I know it, you know it, everyone fucking knows it man. You cannot give me all of this. You cannot. I looked at that brick, and I realized I had be dead within a day. And you have been so good to me. How much do I owe you? Like, seriously? All those times? You don't owe me anything, I said. You have been paid up for years. It is not about that though, he replied. It is about the gesture. You helped me. So here is what I am thinking. You take this and you sell it? And any money you split with me and then I use that money to buy more stuff or if you when I need it. That way I never have enough on me to just go crazy. You know? I cannot even tell you how much strength this took, by the way. I have been driving the streets for like 5 hours just thinking this through carefully. I took the elevator up here 3 times. But I know it is what I need. I cannot leave this place with that brick. I will kill myself. I weighed it up in my hands. It was easily worth $1,000, and I had to admit, what he said made sense. There was no way any addict could be trusted with that much, least of all him. And, just to reiterate, it was worth a shitload of money. You found this? I asked, clearly incredulous. I glanced at the gold leaf symbol stamped onto one side, failing to recognize it, but feeling an intense anxiety in its presence. In a fucking ditch, he said, his face elated. Someone must have just chucked it. Whoosh, straight out the window. All right, I agreed. This is a good deal, I added, hesitating for reasons I couldn't say. But I decided I was just being irrational because, by all accounts, this was a fucking good surprise. Free money is always a good surprise. Come on, I told him. I will weigh a little out for you. Instinctively he reached into his pocket and started counting notes. It is your stuff, I snapped, and he laughed at himself. But I just shook my head and took it to my scales, where I began taking off just a little to give to Rollo. Pretty soon I was left sitting in my flat on my own, staring at the brick with a sense of confusion, partly at the preceding events, partly at the strange pit in my stomach, and partly because that symbol made my eyes hurt. Over the next week that brick was sold in pieces to each of my customers, slowly whittling itself down until about half was left. Bit by bit I sold it to all 11 of my regulars, and then, bit by bit, none of them came back. When it came to Sunday, a day where my phone is normally lit up and my door is a fucking tambourine, there was silence. I tried calling them all, but there was no answer for each of them. I cannot stress to you just how weird this is. Heroin addicts don't skip appointments with me. It just doesn't work like that, not unless they are dead. And that was a harrowing thought to have. All of them? Man, even back then I took a long hard look at that brick. Something about it had bothered me the entire time, and now I was truly worried. Do you know what they had do to me if I sold bad drugs to 11 different middle-class Londoners? One of them is a blonde girl in her 20s. Fucking blonde. Do you have any idea how bad that would be for me? My first stop was the news. At least 3 of the people I sold to were Oxbridge graduates with banking jobs, and I figured if they died, it had be in the papers somewhere. People love those kinda scandalous stories, so I started googling names until I got a hit. It was not what I expected. That blonde I just mentioned. I am gonna call her Milkaper, anyways. She turned up in one paper having gone missing, last seen a few days before. It was a plea from her husband and parents, asking for her to come home. The paper mentioned her addiction, and there were worries she had relapsed or worse, died. Well, I was worried too, but what I knew that they didn't was that Milkaper had a small flat she rented in a friend's name where she smoked before going to work. I also happened to have a key from a misguided attempt at seduction, long story. I had an address and access. And I rushed there hoping to God I had find her partying her tits off or handcuffed to a bed deep in withdrawal. If only. I entered quietly only to find a dingy shithole in a high-rise apartment that was a huge step down from the last time I had been there. Somehow, there were signs of decay. I mean, 10+ years of rot and decay. Wallpaper was peeling, the ceilings were yellow, pipes had rusted, plaster had chipped, the windows had faded. I had been there just a year before and it had been a newly decorated flat. It wasn't squalor that had done the damage, no. It was derelict, broken down the way old houses are. Nothing about it made sense to me. I triple-checked the address, but sure enough, that was the right place. So I kept looking and eventually I found Milkaper. At least, I figure it was her because of the clothes. Really, I guess all I found was a pile of bones in a sundress with some faint straw-colored hair. Her skull, her mouth, was wide open and the sockets empty, and it just looked like she was in pain. And the porcelain tub was all stained a dark red, looking an awful lot like a puddle of blood. I felt like I had stumbled into a crypt, the way her bones looked brittle with age, with little teeth marks from rats. Was this a bad attempt at faking her death? I wondered. After a little more poking around, I found some papers stuffed between her pelvis and her dress. I pulled them out and unrolled them, recoiling from the smell, and read. I don't wanna put it all up in print, but she wrote about some fucked up stuff. Real nasty messed up things, like I just saw SE7 and messed up. It nearly made me sick and, struggling to understand anything in the moment, I put those crazy words down to her having a fucked up troubled mind. After looking around a bit more and not finding anything, I took the notes and left. At the bottom of the last page she had sketched symbol from the brick in my flat, and that freaked me out. None of the people, aside from Rollo, could have possibly seen that symbol, and I did not like it being there one tiny little bit. It left me shaken, not just because of the potential trouble it might bring, but because I was worried that it really was Milkaber in that tub, and that something awful had happened to her. So I decided to check up on the others. It wasn't easy, but I managed to visit at least 2 others before morning. The first of the 2 was a guy I will call Snickers who, if you can believe it, was a professor of English literature at KCL. He was something of a tortured artist when he was younger, and while he later grew up and let go of the artist part, he guarded the tortured part like a tiger protecting her cub. When I first knocked the door of his own personal little fuckpit, I heard what I had best describe as a kind of quiet sobbing and some shuffling. I wound up banging at his door for a good 10 minutes before someone finally let me in, and it wasn't at Snickers. The guy didn't even greet me or look surprised. He was a young man, early 20s, and I had have bet my life that he was one of Snickers' many student hookups. Not that it mattered, but I followed him carefully as he held both his arms and shivered violently, tears streaming down his cheeks. Both of us sat down opposite one another, and the first thing he said was not what I expected at all. "What the fuck happened, man?" he said, stifling a sob. "What? Where am I?" he asked. I don't it, what the fuck happened, man? Where did we go? Where is Snickers?" I asked. "What the fuck? We were all there. You saw exactly what happened, man. They made us watch. All of us, me especially. You saying you don't fucking remember?" "I think you have mistaken me for someone else," I answered. "What happened her?" The kid stopped and stared at me for a long minute before sniffling and pulling his knees up to his chest, holding them closed while he rocked back and forth. His eyes were distant, and when he spoke next he didn't talk to me. "I thought you were Dan," he said. "Who are you?" "I am a friend of Snickers," I answered. I was worried something had happened. The kid laughed, and for a brief moment I saw a network of cuts leading down his neck onto his chest. "I don't know," he answered, a quiver in his voice. "We were here, we got high, and then Jesus Christ," he broke down, holding his face in his hands and crying. I waited patiently until he could resume. "Oh, it was fucking awful, man. You don't even know. They didn't even come. We went to the man, floating through I don't even fucking know, the sky? We just all wound up there, washed up on the shore, and then they came and they took us, and I thought it was just a trip, you know? Just a bad trip, but it weren't it like that at all. Oh fuck, man, my mum, oh my god, how am I even going to explain this to her? We have been gone so long." I looked around for a moment and took in the state of Snickers' apartment, noticing the strange dust that coated everything and the peculiar person-shaped imprint on the sofa. "How long were you gone?" I asked. "You should know, man. You think they let us keep fucking clocks? Where are the police? Where are the ambulances? It has been a year at least." "No," I said. "I saw Snickers just a few days ago." "No." "Yes," I answered. "No, they kept us for years, man." I stood up and the boy flinched. But I happily showed him my phone and the date, and even let him scroll through BBC News for a good few minutes. No, he mumbled before looking up at me, pleading. "It wasn't just a dream, man, we fucking lived it. We lived it every day for years, all 4 of us. You don't know what it was like, the things they did to us. What they did to Snickers." He burst into tears, and this time I realized he wasn't going to recover quickly. I asked him if anyone else was around, and he feebly pointed towards a nearby bedroom door. What I found inside that room was not what I expected. You could have hung at a modern art museum and no one would have noticed. Milkaber upset me. But I had done a good job convincing myself it was like a big elaborate ruse. It is easier to believe that than God knows what. I mean, what was the alternative? That those things she had written were true? Years spent taken away and subjected to humiliation, degradation, and unspeakable torture? But that room I couldn't convince myself that was a ruse. I couldn't rightly say if Snickers was in there. But whatever it was, it had been a person once, and now it knelt on the bed in a position of supplication. Their face, it didn't really exist anymore, except for the mouth that had been cut so far back into their head I could glimpse vertebrae. The rest of the skull was just smooth-pitted wrinkled skin, like a person's thumb after a long bath. The skin of their armpits, where the arms and torso met, had started to melt together, forming a broken web joint that forced their arms into prayer. All along their abdomen and back, human teeth had been implanted only to keep on growing into strange bones that broke apart stitches and surgical staples, turning into grotesque hairy tumors that covered their midriff like barnacles on a ship. They knelt in a pool of crimson liquid that looked much deeper than it was, rising to their belly button. The strange lapping water gave off the strange sensation of looking down onto an enormous blue-red ocean. At moments it looked as thin as water, other times it looked as viscous as slime mold. Rising up out of it were 10 different limbs, each one thinning unnaturally until it terminated in a single lonely toe. New joints had been added to them, seemingly at random, so that this person was hunched over their branching legs like an immense mangrove tree rising out of a blood-soaked swamp. And marching up out of the waters was a forest of mushrooms no bigger than my thumb, tiny and identical like neat orderly buttons, their caps opening and closing in a rhythmic dance that made my skin crawl. And then something twitched in the water, looking for the world like a breaching fish. And I was out of there, unable to even think or reason what had happened in clear terms. "Look what they did to us, man," the boy screamed as I stumbled past him, tearing open his shirt to reveal a single large black equine eye embedded in his chest. "It took years to grow us into this. Fucking years," he screamed, his shrill voice following me all the way down the hall. And with that I was back in my car shaking, barely able to think. At this stage I was doing mental backflips to explain what I had seen, and somehow I got it in my head that what I needed to do was to check up on the others. It had to be fake, I told myself. The only way I had prove it was if I followed things up. I had to know, it is the human condition and I couldn't walk away. I couldn't retreat. I couldn't possibly accept living in a world where anything I had seen in that flat was real. I drove away from that block way too fast, but eager to get on and find answers. The closest place next on my list was an office run by a man I called Arrow. He fancied himself as a sort of Gordon Gekko, Wolf of Wall Street kinda guy, but he was the richest man I knew, and whip smart too. I hoped to God he wasn't in on all this bullshit and could offer some kind of help or explanation. Earlier that year he had given me a security card for his building, and I luckily fished it out of my dash before going in. He had a floor or two in this massive high-rise, and I got the card out ready to explain why I needed to enter the building at 2 a.m. to some bleary-eyed security guard, only to find the front desk empty. It was a simple flick of a switch to call the elevator, but I couldn't stop staring at the half-drunk cup of tea waiting for the guard. Probably gone to the loo, I thought, before briefly touching the ice-cold cup and calling it into doubt. Man, it was dark in there, and unsettling in the way that nighttime offices always are. Any place that goes from busy to quiet has that air about it. The sense that once everyone goes home something comes slinking out of the shadows to stretch its legs. I felt like I was intruding, but I couldn't bring myself to leave it yet. I was secretly trying to tell myself I had been hallucinating in Snickers' place, and I desperately wanted someone to reassure me that was true. I used the card to get access to Arrow's floor and walked out into an otherwise dead office space. Even though the sky in London isn't very clear, I could still see a full moon hanging over the skyline, following me like an eye as I walked along the enormous windows. Arrow's office was easily found. It was the only one with the blinds pulled shut, unlike the others that were as clear and transparent as a scientist is Beaker. His name and title were on full display, and I could have walked right in, but something about the silence unsettled me. There was the sense that someone was moving around in those shadows, ducking and scuttling below cubicles and desks, just out of sight, whenever I turned. So I tried to peek through the blinds of his office first without going in, just to get a sense of what was in there. All I could glimpse was a desk chair facing me, and the dark outline of someone sitting in it. Steeling my nerves, I forced myself to open the door, and found a desiccated corpse waiting for me. Although the skin was leathery and dry, pocked with peeling blisters and signs of decay, enough of the features remained that I could easily tell it was Arrow. Unlike the others, he looked asleep, peaceful even. For a moment I stared at him, lost in the silence, when something behind me fell over and I whipped around, heart thundering. It was Arrow, looking a little younger than when I'd last seen him. I was shocked to see him after I'd convinced myself of the corpse's identity, and for a moment I looked back and forth while he stumbled in, stopping to take a breath with his hands on his knees, before looking up at me and smiling. "Oh, thank God you are here," he said, panting. "What happened?" I asked. "How long has it been?" How long has it been?" he repeated. "I am amazed any of this is still here." "Not long," I answered. "I spent so long wondering if I'd have to come back," he said. "I thought I had never see this place again." "What happened?" "Oh, who knows," he said. "It has been so long I can barely remember my own name, let alone." Arrow stared at me, his face wrought with confusion and his eyes pleading. When I told him my name, he looked deeply thankful. "That is right," he said, nodding. "Yes, I remember you now. And did I have a wife?" "No," I said, shaking my head. I almost said something else, standing there so close to him. Looking back, I am glad I didn't. Instead I asked, "Arrow man, you gotta tell me what the fuck is going on. Who is that in your chair?" "I guess I wound up going somewhere, you know? It was beautiful. You should see it. They gave me everything. Everything I could ever want. Even eternal life. I was there for a lot longer than just one lifetime." "That," he said, pointing to the body in the chair. "That is the old me, my old shell before they gave me a younger one. They can do incredible things. It was beautiful. But now I'm home." He laughed with relief and gently caressed the carpet. "Home sweet home." He smiled at me, turning into the moonlight for the very first time, and an inexplicable wave of revulsion washed over me. I had to swallow it, trying hard to ignore the bile rising in my throat. It was hard to see, but something about his pallor unsettled me. "Come on," I said, "let us get you back to your..." Once more a look of confusion briefly flashed across his face, his eyes flicking to his surroundings before landing back on me. "Of course," he said, nodding slightly. "Home. This is... this isn't..." I reached down and pulled him up, trying not to wince at the slick feel of his cold palms. Leaning down when I did, I couldn't help but notice a speck of blood across his shoes. "They gave you everything?" I asked. "Oh, everything," he said, suddenly gushing. "A human could want for nothing. Oh, the food, the clothing, the knowledge. It was divine." "And the women?" I asked. "Magnificent," he smiled. "Good," I said, trying to hold back a cry. "Arrow was gay." "Let me go get my keys," I said, my voice just starting to break. "I dropped them a while back." I turned and went to leave, stopping for a moment in the doorway to look at the doppelganger. He was staring at me, his eyes overcome with a frightening intensity. At that moment, I dropped the pretense and ran, making for a twisting path through the office, and doing my utmost best to ignore the sounds of wet footprints behind me. I don't know if he was breathing or panting, but it sounded like a gale wind passing through a beehive. I was desperate to put something between this thing and myself, and for a moment I almost ran to the elevator, but at the last moment images of me slamming my finger into the call lift button as he shuffled out of the darkness burst into my mind, and I went for the stairs instead. The first thing I saw when I opened the door were the remains of the security guard. Unlike everything I had seen so far, something about him bent over, blood pooling around his shredded entrails, grounded me. He hadn't been altered or butchered. It wasn't like some crazy nightmare. He had been assaulted and from the looks of it stabbed, repeatedly. I nearly slipped in his blood, but I was careful, managing to shuffle around it before bounding down those stairs, leaping 3 or 4 steps at a time. Almost willing myself to fall just in the hope that it'd get me down quicker. Above me, that thing burst into the stairwell. I half expected it to taunt me, but it just made these shrill, almost bird-like cries of joy. It wasn't far behind me and it closed the distance fast. It was barely a single flight behind me when it spread its arms, let out a swine-like squeal, and jumped headfirst in my direction. It hit the concrete barrier hard and broke its neck immediately, falling in a broken pile of muscle and bones just a few feet away. It was like it didn't even know the limits of its own body, and I shuddered at the thought of what it might once have been. As it lay there, a small pool of that crimson fluid slowly oozed out of every orifice, and from that strange blood rose thousands of little brown mushrooms, unfolding their caps with the smooth grace of a dancer. Barely a minute later and the flesh within had started to crumple and hiss, leaving loose skin hanging off bones like clothes on a washing line, the slackening mouth leering at me like a drunken idiot as grin. I don't remember much else from that night. I awoke in the driver's seat of my car a few hours later, engine idling at a green light as a van driver went caveman on his horn. I drove home, ready to write the whole mad night off, eager to pretend it hadn't happened. It was something I might have managed were it not for the brick waiting for me in my flat. Now I have finally caught up with my rest, and I am left wondering if it is worth checking out the other 8 people. I have maybe a night or more before the police realize I am the common denominator for a lot of carnage and misery, and maybe getting ahead of it is the only chance I have of knowing what the hell to do. But today, when I finally collapsed in my bed, I dreamed. I dreamed of a city on a coast with blue-green waters, a collapsed moon hanging in the sky. I dreamed of things that lived there, filled with ambivalence and cruelty. I saw dungeons and torture chambers filled with people toiling away, and amongst them I saw Arrow, Rollo, and Milkaber, old and frail, beating rocks with stones, while shadow-covered figures grow ready to satisfy strange and unspeakable desires. And when I awoke, I was screaming, that strange brick burning its symbol into my palm. Stop. It ends when I say it ends. Now, be a nice human and scroll down and hit the like button. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Thanks for watching.